जो वर्कशॉप हो रही है ये खासकर कैंसर के मरीज़ों के लिए हो रही है जिनको छोटी उम्र में कैंसर हो जाता है। कई बार शादी होने से पहले कैंसर हो जाता है या बच्चे होने से पहले कैंसर हो जाए या फैमिली कंप्लीट होने से पहले कैंसर हो जाए। तो कैंसर के बड़े बड़े इलाज आ गए हैं, ये वाले पेशेंट ठीक भी हो जाते हैं। पर जो इसके ट्रीटमेंट है, इसकी जो सर्जरी है, इसकी जो कीमोथेरेपी है, रेडियोथेरेपी है, इम्यूनोथेरेपी है, उससे ये हमारे एग्स और गैमीट्स उनको परमानेंटली नुकसान हो सकता है और परमानेंटली पेशेंट स्टेराइल हो सकता है।
दर्शकों, पंजाब प्लस चैनल पे आपका स्वागत है। आज हम आए हैं फर्टिलिटी प्रिजर्वेशन, क्योंकि जो फर्टाइल कपल्स हैं उनको भी बच्चे चाहिए और उसके लिए ये एक बड़ा सेमिनार यहाँ पर कॉन्फ्रेंस हो रही है। और डॉक्टर जो सारे इसके प्रीति हैं और डॉक्टर लज्जा और डॉक्टर रजनी जी, ये सारे हमारे साथ हैं। बात करेंगे इनके साथ। आप सभी का स्वागत है हमारे स्पेशल शो में।
ये आज जो वर्कशॉप हो रही है ये खासकर कैंसर के मरीज़ों के लिए हो रही है जिनको छोटी उम्र में कैंसर हो जाता है। कई बार शादी होने से पहले कैंसर हो जाता है या बच्चे होने से पहले कैंसर हो जाए या फैमिली कंप्लीट होने से पहले कैंसर हो जाए। तो कैंसर के बड़े बड़े इलाज आ गए हैं, ये वाले पेशेंट ठीक भी हो जाते हैं। पर जो इसके ट्रीटमेंट है, इसकी जो सर्जरी है, इसकी जो कीमोथेरेपी है, रेडियोथेरेपी है, इम्यूनोथेरेपी है, उससे ये हमारे एग्स और गैमीट्स उनको परमानेंटली नुकसान हो सकता है और परमानेंटली पेशेंट स्टेराइल हो सकता है। तो ऐसे मरीज़ों को फर्टिलिटी प्रिजर्व, उनका रिप्रोडक्टिव कैपेसिटी को हम कैसे प्रिजर्व कर सकते हैं, उसके ऊपर आज ये CME ऑर्गेनाइज हो रही है, जिसमें बठिंडा के और ऑल इंडिया इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ मेडिकल साइंसेज के सीनियर डॉक्टर्स, सीनियर फैकल्टी, हमारे आसपास के रीजन के हरियाणा, राजस्थान और बठिंडा के गायनेकोलॉजिस्ट, सर्जन्स, कैंसर स्पेशलिस्ट, यहाँ एम्ब्रियोलॉजिस्ट और जो असिस्टिव रिप्रोडक्टिव टेक्निक्स में काम करते हैं डॉक्टर्स, वो सब यहाँ इकट्ठा हुए हैं। और ये प्रोग्राम पूरा दिन चलेगा, जिसमें पहले सारी टेक्निक्स के बारे में थ्योरेटिकली बताया जाएगा। फिर उसके बाद वर्कशॉप में हैंड्स ऑन ट्रेनिंग दी जाएगी, जिसमें स्पर्म फ्रीजिंग, स्पर्म वॉशिंग, एग फ्रीजिंग, एम्ब्रियो फ्रीजिंग, इन सब की हैंड्स ऑन ट्रेनिंग हमारे यंग डॉक्टर्स को दी जाएगी।
डॉक्टर साहब, क्या कहना चाहेंगे कि एक ऐसा इवेंट जो, क्योंकि हर बंदे को ही चाहिए बच्चे, और जब ये प्रॉब्लम आ जाती है कैंसर की और उसके बाद बच्चे होना, और उसके लिए आप लोग अवेयर कर रहे हो अपने डॉक्टर्स को भी, और बहुत बड़ा यहाँ पर।
देखो, ऐसे है कि जब भी किसी लेडी को पता चलता है यंग एज में कि उसको कैंसर है, उसके लिए तो एकदम से दुनिया ही बदल जाती है। उसका सारा होप ख़त्म हो जाता है कि उसको प्रेगनेंसी तो क्या कि घर वाले भी निकाल देते हैं कि अब तो कैंसर है, बच्चा तो हो नहीं सकता। बड़े सारे सोशल इश्यूज भी आते हैं अलॉन्ग विद दैट कि उसको ज़िंदगी का तो रिस्क होता ही है। बट ये होपलेस सिचुएशन नहीं है। हम इसी के बारे में बात करना चाहते हैं कि अगर अर्ली स्टेज पे डायग्नोस हो जाए कैंसर, तो उसमें ना हम उसकी मतलब जो रिप्रोडक्टिव पोटेंशियल है कि बच्चा होने वाली उसमें जो है पोटेंशियल, उसको हम रख सकते हैं, मतलब उसको प्रिजर्व कर सकते हैं। तो उसके लिए हम आज बड़े सारे लेक्चर भी प्लान करे हैं कि जैसे बच्चेदानी का कैंसर हो गया, उसमें भी हम क्या सर्जरी कर सकते हैं और कैसे उसको बचा सकते हैं कि कैंसर वाला पार्ट निकल जाए। दूसरी बात यह है कि अंडेदानी का कैंसर हो जाता है तो यंग एज में लोगों को पता ही नहीं है कि ये कैंसर अगर फर्स्ट स्टेज पे हो तो उसके लिए तो सिर्फ एक ही अंडेदानी निकल सकती है और दूसरी अंडेदानी अच्छे से काम कर सकती है और बच्चेदानी निकालने की जरूरत नहीं पड़ती। और तीसरा यूट्रस का कैंसर होता है, उसमें भी वो आजकल कैंसर के थोड़े इंसिडेंट्स बढ़ रहे हैं, लेकिन फिर भी वो होपलेस नहीं है। उसमें भी दूरबीन से सर्जरी करके या उसके बाद भी उसको थोड़े हार्मोन दे के हम यूट्रस बचा सकते हैं और जब उसके बच्चे पैदा हो जाएं उसके बाद हम उसको निकाल सकते हैं। तो ऐसा कोई होपलेस सिचुएशन नहीं है। दूसरी बात ये है कि अगर मान लो निकालना ही पड़े तो उसके जो अंडे हैं वो प्रिजर्व हो सकते हैं और उसके जो ओवरीज हैं जहाँ से अंडे बनते हैं वो भी प्रिजर्व हो सकते हैं। तो इसके बारे में आज सारा जो सेमिनार है, CME है, सारा ऐसे ही चलेगा। और बाकी जो यंग डॉक्टर्स हैं उनको हम सिखाएंगे कि ये नई टेक्निक्स क्या है, उनके एग्ज़ाम में भी काम आएगी और वो जो सोसाइटी है उसको भी स्प्रेड करेंगे कि भी ऐसे ऐसे चीज़ें अवेलेबल है, क्योंकि बहुत सारे लोगों को इसके बारे में जानकारी है ही नहीं। सो इसी के बारे में आज सारा हमारा सेमिनार है।
डॉक्टर प्रीति जी, क्या कहना चाहेंगे कि आज एक बहुत ही बड़ा इवेंट है ये, जो हम CME कहेंगे, उन पेशेंट्स के लिए एक रे ऑफ होप आप लोग डॉक्टर्स लेकर आए हैं?
Actually, I am the head of the Department of Anatomy, so I am not actually directly dealing with this. So I am just talking about the basic structure of the ovum and the sperm, and how we can explore this part in anatomy, and because we also deal with the embryology. So that is my main aim of this organizing this conference, and the workshop will also held in the Department of Anatomy. So we want to explore this area in this department.
दर्शकों, जैसे आज हमने इन एक्सपीरियंस डॉक्टर से बात की और आज की जो सीएम है बहुत ही फ्रूटफुल होने वाली है। आप बने रहिए पंजाब प्लस के साथ और देखते रहिए।
I will be mainly concentrating on surgical procedures. I will not be discussing the oocytes preservation and ovarian preservation, which will be discussed in the subsequent lectures in today's conference. So, coming to the introduction, as we know that gynecological malignancies are often diagnosed in postmenopausal age, but there is a rising trend seen in the premenopausal age group also. And the traditional management is total abdominal hysterectomy with bilateral serpingio-oophorectomy that leads to permanent sterility in these cases. And fertility preservation is important at young age, but the patient selection is very crucial. So overall risk of malignancies in young patient younger than 39 is 1 in 39. Ovarian cancer accounts for 5%, and on the top is ovarian cancer, which accounts for around 12%, usually the highest. And overall it is 90% in the borderline ovarian tumors. So first we will discuss the cervical cancer. The incidence is 1.5 to 14.9 per 1 lakh women in the younger age group, that is to the 20 to 49. And 45% of early cancers are usually surgically removed. And the standard management is radical hysterectomy with systemic pelvic lymphadenectomy. So these are the NCCN guidelines which were recently published in 2022 about the fertility sparing surgery in carcinoma cervix. It is only possible to preserve the fertility in stage 1A and B. And in stage 1A, when there is no lymphovascular space invasion, the cone biopsy with negative margin is sufficient. But in stage 1A1 with LVSI and A2, you need to do radical trachelectomy with pelvic lymph node dissection. Coming to the radical trachelectomy, the patient selections, the patient should undergo radical trachelectomy only if there is a strong desire to preserve the fertility. And histopathology diagnosis must be proved by expert. If there is only one expert available, the second opinion can be taken, because it is the most important to have a correct histopathology if we are going for fertility sparing surgery. And the histopathology where it is possible only should be squamous cell carcinoma, adenocarcinoma or adenosquamous carcinoma. Other carcinomas like clear cell carcinoma or high grade carcinoma, the fertility sparing is not, trachelectomy is not advised. And the stage should be 1A1, 1A2 or B1 only, and tumor size should be less than 2 cm, and there should be preferably no evidence of pelvic or lymph node or distance metastasis. Then only it should be planned. And the preoperative assessment require colposcopy, histopathology review I already told, and MRI. And radical trachelectomy can be done by various routes. It can be preferably should be done by vaginally, if it is not possible abdominally or laparoscopically or robotically. All the routes it is possible. Then the radical trachelectomy, the steps are including, first we should do systemic pelvic lymphadenectomy, then excision of cervix with paracervix with 1 or 2 cm of vagina, upper cervical or isthmic encirclage is the most important thing, because if you don't do the encirclage, even if the patient becomes pregnant, there is a high chance of having midterm pregnancy loss. And reconstruction of the uterine carpus to the upper vagina. So these are the steps which we should do. We should do cytological examination and
keep the estradiol levels to minimum. We want to get an optimum number of eggs, plus we have to keep the estradiol levels low. So we have to exercise caution when we are stimulating. Start with low doses of gonadotrophins. This can be done if we are not down-regulating these patients. There are protocols in which first there is pituitary down-regulation and then there is stimulation. So we have to give higher doses of gonadotrophins in those patients. But in cancer patients, antagonist protocol is used where the patient is not down-regulated with GnRH agonist. She is directly started with FSH and HMG, and that too in low doses like 150 IU, 100 IU or 170 to 200 IU. So even aromatase inhibitors like letrozole and tamoxifen, these are anti-estrogens. These agents are also used in the long-term follow-up of CA breast patients, CA endometrium, CA breast. And these patients, these drugs can be added to the stimulation for 5 days, first 5 days. So they will further lower the E2 levels. Then antagonist protocol eliminates the risk of ovarian hyperstimulation, which is the most deadly side effect, iatrogenic side effect of controlled ovarian stimulation. So with an antagonist protocol, we are going to eliminate the risk of ovarian hyperstimulation, and the protocol is short also. So the patients who have come to us for fertility preservation, most of them we have been able to do within 12 to 13 days. And we could start them as soon as they decided to go for oocyte freezing. And we should avoid HCG. Human chorionic gonadotrophin should be avoided at all cost, either for ovulation trigger and for luteal phase support if the patient is going for an embryo transfer. But most of the patients who have cancer, they usually just get their embryos frozen. Oocytes freezing and embryo freezing is done, then they go for their cancer treatments, they go for chemotherapy, then they come back after the cancer is treated for completing their family. So in most of these patients, embryo or oocyte is frozen. Oocyte if the patient is unmarried, and embryo if she's in a stable relationship, or if she's married, then embryo freezing is done. And when we are giving the LH surge as we studied, Dr. Preeti taught us in the first lecture that after the LH surge, there is growth of the Graafian follicle and the oocyte is released and is ready to ovulate. So for trigger in such patients, agonist, GnRH agonist like leuprolide is given and not HCG. So by taking all these precautions, we can minimize the risk of cancer worsening with our treatment. The second question is, what is the response of stimulation in these patients? So obviously patients who are diagnosed or newly diagnosed at a young age with cancer, they are under tremendous stress. Apart from the stress, they have malnourished, they have increased state of catabolism. All these things, they affect their reproductive capacity and they respond poorly to our stimulation. They even have lower AMH and low antral follicle counts when we compare them to a normal population of similar age groups. Their AMH levels and AFC counts are also low. And patients who have CA breast and they are BRCA1 mutation positive, there is association of BRCA1 mutation and poor ovarian response to stimulation. Many patients who are in the elder age group, like more than 35 years of age, and if they are poor responders, they may not produce enough oocytes, and sometimes they have to be stimulated 2 times in the same cycle. So we'll come to that in the further slides. The most important is that we cannot delay the further treatment, the definitive treatment of the patient, which could be radiotherapy, chemotherapy, or a completion surgery. So to avoid delay, we start stimulation as soon as the patient thinks that she has to preserve her fertility and she reaches the hospital. So the cycle is planned early. We all know that follicular genesis, this recent theory, it occurs in a wave-like fashion, and there are multiple follicle recruitment waves in a single menstrual cycle. And this has been proved beyond doubt in the recent years. So ovarian stimulation, it can be initiated even if she is not on her day 2 or day 3 of cycle. And dual stimulation protocols, there are protocols where we give her stimulation 2 times in the same cycle. We start in the proliferative phase, We give her gonadotrophins with the antagonist protocol, we give her agonist trigger, we do her oocyte pickup, then we wait for 5 days, and after 5 days we start another similar cycle of stimulation. Because there are many patients who will just make 1 egg or 2 eggs. Then there is no sense in freezing. For freezing we should have at least 7, 8 oocytes. So in those patients we can even do a dual stimulation, which would take around 28 to 30 days. A single cycle usually takes 10 to 14 days. So just a brief about the antagonist cycle. So after assessing the ovarian reserve with ultrasound, antral follicle count, AMH, and after checking the general health of the patient, she should be medically fit also. She should not have high risk factors for pregnancy in future. Gonadotrophin injections, they are started and they're given daily for 5 to 7 days. After this, a follicle monitoring is done with transvaginal ultrasound scan. Gonadotrophin dose is adjusted according to the response of the patient. If she has a good response, the dose can be brought lower. If she doesn't respond well, the dose can be increased. When the follicles reach a size of 13 to 14 mm, a daily antagonist injection is started to prevent a premature LH surge and follicle rupture. Because for oocyte freezing, we don't want the follicle to ovulate. It should not rupture. So we have to take it out, we have to pick it before it ruptures. Once 3 to 4 cycles, follicles reach a size of 17 to 18 mm, ovulation trigger is given with GnRH agonist for the final maturation and release of oocytes, and a transvaginal oocyte retrieval is planned 36 to 38 hours later. In dual stim, a second similar cycle of CS is initiated 5 days after oocyte retrieval. So this is a brief outline, and this is the protocol which has to be used in cancer patients. So this is just a video which is showing the equipments. So transvaginal oocyte retrieval, we need a transvaginal ultrasound scan, a TVS probe. Please go to the video, previous slide. Then we need a biopsy guide on the TVS probe. And then we need this needle. Now this is a single lumen follicle flushing needle which is attached to an aspiration tube. And my assistant is holding a pre-warmed 15 ml test tube in her hand. So please come to the next slide. I welcome Dr. D.K. Singh, Director, AIMS, Bathinda. Welcome, sir. Needle goes into the center of the follicle and we can see that the follicle is collapsing. At the same time, the fluid is collecting in the aspiration tube, and once the tube is full, it is passed into the embryology lab, and the embryologist who's handling the gametes, he will put the fluid in a petri dish and he will take out the cumulus oophorescens complexes, COCs. So in patients who have cancer, we have to take precautions. It has to be absolutely, disinfection is very important. For this procedure, we cannot use any disinfectant, no betadine. We have to wash the vagina nicely with almost 1 to 2 liters of normal saline, a warm normal saline wash. We cannot use betadine, which is very important. So we can't use anything which is toxic to the gametes. Now, after follicle aspiration, this is what the embryologist sees on the stereozoom. This is not the COC. The COC is denuded with hyaluronidase and mechanical pipetting. So here we can see the polar body. This is the polar body. This is the zona pellucida, and this is the zona pellucida, the outer thinner layer, and the polar body we can see in all the oocytes. So this is an M2. This is an M2, metaphase 2 mature oocyte. So this is a good quality oocyte, and all these oocytes for patients who have come for oocyte freezing, now this is the stage. After 3 to 4 hours of incubation, they are vitrified. The patients who want to go for embryo freezing, there these oocytes, they are fertilized, denuded oocytes or pre-warmed frozen oocytes. They are always fertilized with ICSI, intracytoplasmic sperm injection. Can we go to the next slide, please? Video लगा दो, next वाला. So previous ही लगा दो. Yeah. So in this slide we can see these are washed sperms which are suspended in PVP. This is a media which will reduce the motility of the sperm and we can handle them. Otherwise they are moving at quite a rapid speed. So here you will watch that the embryologist is cutting the tail of the sperm. By cutting the tail of the sperm, he is activating the sperm and he will catch the sperm in the pipette. So he has to catch one good looking sperm in the pipette. So थोड़ा speed बढ़ा दो. Yeah, so this is how this goes into the injection pipette. Please show the next video. Next slide. So this video shows intracytoplasmic sperm injection. Speed बढ़ा दो थोड़ी सी. Yeah. So this is the M2 oocyte. We can see the polar body because this is a higher magnification. This is the white line membrane. And this is the injection needle with the sperm. It pierces the zona pellucida white line membrane and then it goes into the cytoplasm. And then the embryologist ensures that he is in the cytoplasm. He aspirates a little cytosol and then he injects the sperm. So for frozen oocytes, for vitrified oocytes, because they are denuded and there the zona becomes hard. So this is the method which is used for fertilizing them when the patient comes back for pregnancy after her cancer treatment. Please go to the previous slides. Now I discuss about vitrification and the different methods, just the theoretical part, because the next lectures which will deal with the vitrification media, they will deal in detail with the technique. And we are going to have a training in the evening on oocyte vitrification. And we'll be giving hands-on training to the candidates, to the delegates who have registered for the workshop. So oocyte vitrification is a very widespread technique now. With the widespread use of vitrification technique, the success rate of IVF with frozen oocytes, they are similar with the success with those of fresh oocytes. When we started vitrification, we started them with embryos. And we've been doing embryo vitrification since 2007, 2008. But that time we used to counsel the patients that we should have at least 10 to 11 oocytes, because from those the recovery rates were lower. We could get only 1 to 2 good quality after thawing. But now with the advancements of the technique and the advancements in the media, the quality, the success rate with frozen oocyte is similar to those with fresh oocytes. Now we can, with conviction, we can offer this treatment to our patients. One of the most important advancements in the ART in the last 20 years, they have happened in oocyte cryopreservation, and it has become an established procedure for both social freezing for people who are delaying family, who delay marriages, or elective. This social freezing is also called elective freezing, and even medical freezing for patients who are going for a surgery which will make them sterile, or they're going for chemotherapy or radiotherapy.
Thank you everybody. As we have Director Sir with us, so I would like to welcome our Director Sir. It is my great pleasure to invite our worthy Director, Professor D.K. Singh Sir, who have an immense experience in hospital management and medical education. He also worked as Director of RIMS Ranchi. As a result of his dedication, he has established 324-bedded trauma center at BHU. He was head of Department of Trauma and Emergency at AIIMS Bhopal. He has been a member of various selection committees like AIIMS, BHU, ICMR and other medical colleges. His guidance and encouragement have been invaluable to us.
To all of you, and I would like to invite our worthy directors and all the dignitaries for the lamp lighting ceremony.
our respected director sir, Professor D.K. Singh sir, on the stage for some to enlighten us with some words.
Who is a PMC representative, Dr. Dhillon, who is the CMO, Parinda, and Dr. Manjeet Sidhu, President of the Gynae Society, Professor Raja Goyal, and other senior faculty members and participating delegate. Let me first tell you that everyone accept that every woman have to have the enjoyment of motherhood, whether it is a cancer patient or cardiac patient. But at the same time, Dr. Ravi is here. We are still struggling maternal mortality. Dr. CMO साहब के पास every day must he be receiving to start the SNCU in proper way. Few days back only, I read in the newspaper that 43 children died in Nanded. So we are struggling to produce one, but we are allowing, maybe I am not blaming anybody particularly, to die 43 in a day. India is a country of paradox. I will tell you my personal family experience about this. I agree that every woman have every right of motherhood, enjoy the motherhood. It is the most peaceful phase of the motherhood. As I told you that I will tell you my family experience. My daughter-in-law, in the deep COVID period, she was in Bangalore and she got pregnant. One day, she started having severe pain and she approached 40 women in Bangalore.
Now, I would like to invite Dr. Lajja Devi Goyal, Dr. Preeti Chaudhary and Dr. Rajni Jindal on stage to felicitate our worthy director, sir.
Dr. Ravi, our member from Punjab Medical Council.
Director AIMS, Dr. Tejwant, Civil Surgeon Faridkot, Dr. Lajja, Dr. Nishikar, and Bathinda Obstetric and Gynae Society. I convey my sincere regards to all of you and very good morning. मैंने अभी डॉक्टर साहब की बात सुनी एबेंज बिल्डिंग की, तो ये सिर्फ IVF में नहीं है सर, ये एक्चुअली सारे डॉक्टर्स का है। मैं आपको अपना एक्सपीरियंस बताता हूँ पंजाब मेडिकल काउंसिल का, कि एक महीने में कम से कम 300 से 500 एप्लीकेशंस अगेंस्ट डॉक्टर्स आ रही हैं हमारे पास, अगेंस्ट फ्रॉम द प्राइवेट सेक्टर, फ्रॉम द गवर्नमेंट सेक्टर एंड फ्रॉम द मेडिकल कॉलेज। तो ये सिर्फ IVF का या कार्डियोलॉजिस्ट का नहीं है, ये तकरीबन होल सोसाइटी का है। अब आप लोगों का बिहेवियर इज चेंजिंग अ लॉट, क्योंकि लोगों का टेम्परामेंट और पेशेंस बड़ी कम हो गई है। पर मैं आपको आज की जो कॉन्फ्रेंस की जो मैडम है डॉक्टर रजनी जिंदल, इनके बारे में मैं बड़ी कॉन्फिडेंस और अथॉरिटी से बोल सकता हूँ कि शी इज वन ऑफ द मोस्ट एथिकल IVF प्रैक्टिशनर ऑफ द होल रीजन। हमारे लोग जब भी मेरे पास आते हैं, मुक्तसर में IVF शुरू हुआ, मोगा में शुरू हुआ, या पंजाब के और डिफरेंट पार्ट से, शी इज द मेंटर ऑफ मोस्ट ऑफ द पीपल। और जो आपने कार्डियोलॉजिस्ट की बात की, हमारे कोटपुरा से जितने भी बंदे जाते हैं कहते हैं डॉक्टर जिंदल को ले जाओ, वो एक्चुअली पैथोलॉजिस्ट हैं, नदीर उनको नहीं करनी पैना। And he is the most competent, both couple is the most ethical people of our region. So I congratulate you, all of you. And सबसे इम्पोर्टेंट बात जो आपने बोला कि आपकी बात सुन के मेरे को है कि आप गए 40s में और उनका मूड खराब था। ऐसे ही मेरे को 6 साल पहले ना जी एक गायनाकोलॉजिस्ट की कंप्लेंट हो गई, तो हम DC साहब के पास गए। वो बोलते कि चलो जी आप चलो, आपके दोस्त हैं तो आप मेरे साथ चलो। तो वहाँ पे कंप्लेंट थी कि बिहेवियर बड़ा अच्छा नहीं है डॉक्टर का। तो ऐसे कुछ में 2-3 चीज़ें और लगाई हुई थी। तो मैं डीसी साहब ने क्या, मैं कहा डीसी साहब ये ਜਿਹੜੇ गायनेकोलॉजिस्ट ने रात को हर रोज 2-2 3-3 मरीज आ रहे हैं और जो भी पेशेंट है उनका दिमाग में चलता रहता है। They raise their children, they take care of their families, they take care of their house as well as their profession. तो इनको तो आप बहुत ही पॉजिटिव निगाह से देखो, ये ऐसे नहीं चलता। आप 2 बार जाके देखो फिर आपको पता चलेगा कि रात को जागना कैसे होता है। और उसका मेरे को 1 महीने के बाद फोन आया एक बार, कहता यार मैंने ना 2 बड़ी जागना पड़ गया पिछले 2 घंटे, इसलिए मेरे को सीवियर माइग्रेन हो रहा है। कहता तेरी बात ही भी है ये। तो मैंने कहा इसलिए ये बड़ी नारी शक्ति है, तो इसको पूरा ध्यान से पॉजिटिव वे से देखना चाहिए। So again, I congratulate all the members of Bathinda and Obstetric Society to conduct a wonderful conference. But एक मेरी छोटी सी suggestion है to the organizers कि it's better to keep such meetings on Sunday, क्योंकि आज मेरे को बहुत सारे गाइनिक्स का पता चला कि वो उनको इनविटेशन था नहीं या उन लोगों को आज ओपीडी होने की वजह से वो लोग अटेंड नहीं कर सके। बिकॉज ये कॉन्फ्रेंस बड़ी अच्छी है, बड़ी इंफॉर्मेटिव है, एंड दिस बेनिफिट शुड पास ऑन टू मोस्ट ऑफ द पीपल। थैंक यू वेरी मच।
Doctor, once or twice I have come across a patient who have got a very viscous semen, and in spite of waiting for at least 1 hour, it doesn't look liquefied. Then how to go in for IUI in such?
Breaking the viscosity of the viscous semen. So one is a mechanical way in which we pipette out the semen using a normal posture pipette or a 18 gauge needle. But the issue with mechanical pipetting is when you do the mechanical pipetting, you generate air. That air will induce reactive oxygen species, and that can damage the sperm DNA. So you should start with the transfer pipette, 3 ml pipette. Try giving few pushes. If it is not happening, then you can leave it aside. The second method is using chemicals, in which you can use bromelain, you can use chymotrypsin or trypsin. But the issue with chymotrypsin and trypsin and bromelain is you cannot use that sample into the procedure. You can do this at the time of analysis. The third and the safest method is, which is a physiological method, the same sperm wash media which you are using to wash the semen. You dilute the semen sample 1:1 with the sperm wash media. Do a gentle pipetting. Leave it at 37 for 5 to 10 minutes. It will automatically liquefy, and then you wash it, and your sperms will be there. All these factors, if we have ruled out at the time of semen analysis, like ma'am mentioned viscosity, if at the time of analysis I know that this patient has a high viscosity because of any reason, prostatic or unnecessary, or in case your question as well, agglutination, then I will be ready at the time of IUI and AIT what to do. In case of agglutination, again there are 2 ways. One is a conventional or a textbook way which suggests to go for the MAR testing, the mixed agglutination reaction, which will help you ruling out that it's an anti-sperm antibody or there's some other infection. It's a long way. I will not recommend that. Quickest way is, at the time of semen analysis, I know that my patient is having agglutination, high agglutination, gross agglutination. It can be because of anything. It can be because of infections. It can be because of anti-sperm antibodies. What I'll do in that case as an embryologist, at the day of procedure, I will get the sample. I will immediately add sperm wash media in that without waiting for liquefaction. I will induce liquefaction forcefully and immediately wash the sperm. I will separate out the plasma and the sperm. So the anti-sperm antibody, so whatever was there was in the plasma. It is separated. I will do a repeat washing, and my sperms are now free from agglutination, because whatever was there which was causing agglutination was in the plasma, not in the sperm. So it becomes more easy. Although WHO textbook suggests you go for MAR testing and then make sure what is there, then you start on antibiotic therapy or you start on treatment of anti-sperm antibodies. It becomes difficult for the patient also because it becomes cost involvement is there. So better is to do a thorough semen analysis, and then I know the complete picture कि ये issue मेरे को आने वाले हैं. Then accordingly we can wash the sample. Each of you will get a test tube, then you will get the pipettes ऐसी वाली, जिसमें से राम सर will explain you कि आपको कौन सा मीडिया पहले डालना है, कौन सा मीडिया बाद में डालना है, which you will be doing. Then हम आपको सीमन सैंपल देंगे उस मीडिया के ऊपर लेयर करने के लिए. बेसिकली वी आर क्रिएटिंग ए ग्रेडियंट कॉलम, जिसमें आपने नीचे हाई डेंसिटी फिल्टर रखा है सिलिकॉन कोटेड सिलिका का, ऊपर लो डेंसिटी फिल्टर रखा है 40% का, और उसके ऊपर हमने सीमन सैंपल डाला है विच इज ए लिक्विफाइड सीमन सैंपल. देन हम उसको सेंट्रीफ्यूज करेंगे जी, ठीक है. एक टाइम पे 8 ट्यूब सेंट्रीफ्यूज हो सकती हैं इन दिस सेंट्रीफ्यूज. आफ्टर सेंट्रीफिकेशन जो आपके स्पर्म है वो नीचे सेटल हो जाएंगे, और जो बाकी इम्प्योरिटीज़ हैं या प्लाज्मा है वो ऊपर स्टक आउट रह जाएगा. देन आपकी नेक्स्ट एक्सरसाइज क्या रहेगी कि आपको सुपरनेटेंट हटाना है विदाउट डिस्टर्बिंग द पैलेट विद द स्पर्म जो नीचे बैठी है। जब वो सुपरनेटेंट हटा लोगे देन उस पैलेट के ऊपर हम आपको मीडिया देंगे विच इज अ स्पर्म वॉश मीडिया, जेंटली विदाउट क्रिएटिंग एनी एयर बबल्स। देन अगेन हम उसको सेंट्रीफ्यूज करेंगे, इस स्टेप को वॉशिंग बोला जाएगा। आफ्टर वॉशिंग अगेन वही होगा कि जो आपके स्पर्म है वो नीचे बैठ जाएंगे और जो भी बचा खुचा सिलिन कोटेड सिलिका पार्टिकल्स लगे होंगे स्पर्म्स के साथ वो आपके मीडिया में ऊपर सुपरनेटेंट में आ जाएंगे। अगेन यू विल रिमूव द सुपरनेटेंट विदाउट डिस्टर्बिंग द पैलेट। देन जो बची हुई पैलेट है दैट इज उसको आप डाइल्यूट कर लोगे इन 0.4 ml, दैट इज योर सैंपल फॉर IVF और ICSI जहाँ पे आप उसे यूज करना चाहते हैं। द टेक्निक इज नोन एज डेंसिटी ग्रेडिएंट सेंट्रीफ्यूगेशन। अभी तक we call it as a gold standard of sperm preparation till now, until unless we get something which is better than this, because with density gradient centrifugation you can process any kind of sample, whether even it's a seropositive sample also. There are techniques given in the WHO manual. अगर कोई HIV पेशेंट भी आता है उसके लिए भी आप अगर डबल डेंसिटी मेथड से सैंपल प्रिपेयर करते हो, जो आपका फाइनल वॉल्यूम एंड रिजल्ट आ रहा है उसको आप 2 पार्ट में डिवाइड करके एक पार्ट का PCR करवाते हो तो आपको पता चलता है कि वो PCR नेगेटिव है, देन यू कैन यूज दैट सैंपल एंड द वाइफ एंड द किड विल नॉट हैव HIV. देयर इज अ डॉक्यूमेंटेड स्टडीज ऑन दैट. B के केस में ज़्यादा इशू नहीं आता, C के केस में we can follow the same protocol. So that's why they called it as a gold standard.
Have doxorubicin, the influx of the drug is through SLC22A1, 22A16, and elimination or efflux of the drug is through transporters like ABCB1, ABCC1, and so many others. So this is how you have the drug metabolized, and it is transported to its target site through the various transporters. So that is how we need to look at all these genes. The variation has not to be looked at one gene, it has to be looked at all these genes so that you will understand where the variation exists, and that is responsible for inter-individual variation in case of drug response. And we followed a technique which is called as global screening array. This is a chip based technique where we have analyzed almost, it has 24 wells. You see how the chip looks like, and there are 24 wells, and in one go we can analyze around 7 lakh gene variants in each well, including the pharma-GKB markers. That means we have the information available on this site which is called as pharma-GKB. And you can see that the genes which are involved in ADME of cyclophosphamide have been listed in the upper panel, and whereas the genes which are involved in the ADME of doxorubicin, they have been listed in their brown panel. So therefore, using this and then following, we just require 200 nanograms of DNA. That means the entire landscape of the genome is visible to you in terms of, it is not only the drug response genes. This chip can analyze all the genes which are involved in either even the susceptibility to cancer. We have specific chips also which are meant for only breast cancer or cancer related genes, or the drugs which are given to these patients, and response to these can be determined in one go. So we have gone very far in terms of genomic technologies where we can determine the variations in 7 lakh genes in one go. So therefore we followed this technique, and based on this we also then further validated it by other methods like polymerase chain reaction and RFLP, and we could validate whatever, because you are doing that on a large scale. Sometimes you need to validate it further by doing specific which are focusing on one particular gene. So we did it for cyclophosphamide, especially the 2 genes that have come into picture. We did not find any variation in the genes which are involved in the ADME of doxorubicin, but we did find it for cyclophosphamide and CYP2C 1, 9, *2. These *1, *2, *3, *4 are given to these markers where there is a change. And like other genes, especially in pharmacogenomics, wherever we talk about metabolizing genes, we give this *1, *2, *3 kind of this thing. They are designated like that. Similarly, we have validated the ALDH1 A *2 allele and then with again following the conventional techniques of PCR, and we have validated the results of the genome sequencing array, and we could validate it, and we have now established that in conclusion that CYP2C19*2, where you have a G681, that means at the 681th position of the gene there is, instead of guanine, there is an adenine. Zumab therapy, and we observed that 15.71%, 11.43%, and 22.86% of the patients, they reported death recurrence. And study, we classify the patients as patients with good outcome or the patients with the bad outcome. That tells us that whether the drug is influential, does it benefit the patients, or what is the percentage of the patients who are having this influence. And two genes we found, that CCD-ND1 and PIK3CA, they were found to be very significantly, variations obviously in these genes to be significantly associated with poor, them to be associated, like you have PTPN and P53 and other genes. We did not find any influence. And a lower, significantly lower disease-free survival, trastuzumab, who harbored these two mutations, that is CCND1 and PIK3CA. So PIK3, you can see these are both these genes. This actually is involved in the formation of invadopodia, and the one that is cell cycle control gene, that CCND1. So we do carry a statistical analysis where you can, this is called as Kaplan-Meier plot, where you will be able to detect the like mutation status, how many of them they are surviving, and how many, the survival probability is determined by this curve. Similarly, we have like for other, where because we found two genes, mutation in two genes where people were treated with this trastuzumab therapy, and they were not showing good outcome treatment as comparison to the ones who carry the wild type genotypes. So this we try to figure out at molecular level, that what could be the reason for these two genes and giving resistance to the trastuzumab.
He has recurrent implantation failures and got a clinical exome done, and then something like that comes up. Now what to do now, sitting in Bathinda? So could we take your help or Central University?
Work out based on the exome data if you are finding such variants. And that too, it is always better in such cases to employ trios. That means the parents as well as the person who has this problem. Say for example, a girl who is having repeated abortions, if her parents are alive, or her brother and sister. So generally we take trios. And then we try to look at the exomes of all these. So, and we compare, because they will be the best comparisons for us. They come from the same family, they share lot of genome, half from one parent and half from the other. So in that case, if you find such variant repeatedly in this ethnic group, we can help you to find out how far it can be declared as a pathogen.
Nursing Home, Bathinda. Dr. Arvind Sharma, Senior Gynecologist, Sharma Endoscopic Center, Bathinda. And Dr. Kiran Chawda, Gynac Surgeon and IVF Consultant, Chawda Hospital, Bathinda.
Dr. Arvind Sharma, sir, please. Gravida, married for 3 years but with no children, and she was referred from Command Hospital Chandigarh for fertility preservation. This patient had on ultrasound a complex solid cystic mass 8 centimeters into 7 centimeters in the right adnexa. The contrast MRI revealed a solid cystic mass with no fat planes along the uterus. There was no uterine invasion. There was mild to moderate free fluid, which looked exudative. There was no lymphadenopathy. The tumor markers were normal except CA125, which was 170. FNAC from the makeup and those things come into play.
One more thing, how long you can preserve these oocytes or eggs?
See, for normal patients, non-cancer patients, we can preserve them for 10 years according to the new rules, but they can be preserved for as long as one wants in cancer patients. It can be longer than 10 years as per the rules. And we can preserve them forever. Like in liquid nitrogen, they will just remain as they are. Suspended animation, and they become good once we thaw them. Yes.
Actually, we also have something which is called as pre-implantation genetic diagnosis. Is that you can also fertilize it. Do you fertilize it outside?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
It is.
So then once you 8-cell stage embryo, you can take biopsy of one of these cells.
Yes.
And it can be analyzed for the whole genome. So if you are, it's not necessary that those mutations are present, because if you have somatic mutations, they might not come to the oocytes. So therefore you can beforehand also be sure that the
embryo is
healthy and the child is not going to inheriting those mutations. That kind of technology is available.
Fluid and the cyst wall, they were sent for histopathology. In histopathology she revealed a micropapillary serous borderline tumor, but no necrosis and no lymphovascular invasion. So we didn't do a complete oophorectomy at this stage. The patient, she had a history of tuberculosis also earlier, so we did her stimulation and we did her OPU, and then we transferred embryos, but she failed to implant in the first cycle. This patient, after this laparoscopy, the first laparoscopy, she conceived spontaneously also, but then she had a left tubal ectopic pregnancy, which was again managed with surgery. The patient came back after this surgery, and in February 21, we planned a frozen embryo transfer for her. The plan was that we will remove the ovary, had to be removed, the right ovary, which had the borderline ovarian tumor. It had to be removed. That was the treatment of choice for her. But then we were just waiting that she delivers her child, and then the surgery, completion surgery will be done. So the cesarean was done in November 2021, and along with that a right salpingo-oophorectomy was done. And the histopathology of the ovary showed no evidence of malignancy. There was just mild atypia, some metaplastic changes and calcification. This could be due to the previous surgery also. Cystectomy was done in this patient. So this was a stage 1 borderline ovarian tumor where the ovarian capsule was smooth, not involved, and even in the histopathology, everything is negative. So if we look at the literature of borderline ovarian tumors, they account for 15% of all epithelial ovarian cancers. In 80% of cases, the diagnosis is done at stage 1, and more than 1/3 occur in women younger than 40 years of age. So fertility sparing treatment is thus becoming important in this subgroup. Counseling about the risk of recurrence is mandatory, and mucinous borderline ovarian tumor is usually unilateral.
And with the patient as well.
Yeah, the patient's reaction was, oh, I am getting cancer now, ab maine kya karna hai bachcha leke. So, because that stigma that is associated with cancer, ab to kya karna hai maine baby, ab to mere ko cancer hi ho gaya, ab main pata nahi bachungi ki nahi bachungi. So this is the phase in which she is right now. Maybe she'll be more clear in her judgment after a few sessions, and will be able to arrive at a decision for her.
Cancer phobia that to extent that the patient doesn't go to the hospital for test के लिए कहो कि करवा के लाओ.
वो problem.
The name is written.
Just told her that the report is not good. She will take some time to absorb it. And take a rational decision, and it's very difficult for the patient also to decide. So let's see. We'll share.
I wonder, even though it's not for cancer in situ, the well-defined stages which we have in certain other organs, like in cervix, which is a very typical model.
Yes, it's difficult to resect it.
Even a borderline ovarian tumor, not even in endometrium, that kind of orderly progression is seen. No one is sure if there is a precancerous stage or is it a variant of the invasive form. So, still, practically in a younger patient, I think after going through all the literature and knowing whatever we know, we can wait for a reasonable time under surveillance and let her have her reproductive life, complete the family, and then just to give benefit of doubt, do the completion surgery.
But in this case, the course is unpredictable. That is one thing which is disturbing. Like if she has a recurrence, it will be fatal. It will be like a leiomyosarcoma, which doesn't give us much time to act. So pulmonary metastases are common with the recurrence of this tumor.
Sarcoma is aggressive, but some cases are treated. That's right.
Yeah.
There should not be a mistake. You are right. You must get histopath reviewed by 2 or 3 people.
yes. So that's what we planned for her, to go for a chemotherapy. She's a 26-year-old unmarried girl with ductal epithelial carcinoma of right breast with 5 days and recombinant FSH 150 IU 10 days. 10 days she took for stimulation. Then we started antagonist from day 7 to day 10, and then we gave her the agonist trigger from day 11, and then we did the oocyte retrieval on day 13. So I just want to highlight that this is a good protocol for such patients of breast cancer, where estrogen levels have to be low during stimulation. So that's why aromatase inhibitors, which will reduce estrogens, then antagonist will reduce estradiol, then agonist also. So here the target is to keep the estradiol between 300 to 350, though we don't measure, but that is how they are stimulated. So don't give very high doses, and this is an excellent protocol for such patients. Then we retrieved 14 mature M2 oocytes, and we have frozen them in multiple straws. Now let's see when the patient comes back, after she gets treated, then she gets married, and then so we have to, that responsibility of freezing it for a long time and keeping it lies with the center, and we are going to do that for her.
Breast tumors can be hormone dependent and non-hormone dependent.
Yes. Ma'am just talked about ER positive, PR positive, HER2 positive. So they are hormone dependent cancers. So, but with these protocols, and these are the safety guidelines. We don't give HCGs. Then we use anti-estrogens. See, this is a good protocol, and it's just 10 days, and the patient then goes for her treatment. Immediately after this, she goes for her chemotherapy. Thank you.
Because of this session, I went through this literature, but I've known 2 patients. I used to give myself FEC regimen, fluorouracil, epirubicin, which is equivalent to AC. Now fluorouracil has been dropped. Oncologists are available recently. Now we've stopped giving, but earlier, as our in the institution in which we were trained, so the respective department used to administer their own chemotherapy with medical consultation. So after FEC regimen, 2 young patients have conceived by themselves. They were not on tamoxifen, they were ER/PR negative. So, and I was surprised because generally held view is that cyclophosphamide is going to damage, at least cyclophosphamide, if not doxorubicin and F5FU, those are temporary suppressants, but cyclophosphamide is supposed to cause permanent damage to germ cells, whether spermatocytes or even oogonia. So some young patients do escape that kind of damage. No fertility preservation was done for these 2 patients, and I told them that very little chance. You can go and consult IVF people, but they conceived and came and delivered. You never know. As she said that जो ऊपर वाले ने लिखा है जीन्स में वो decode अभी करने की कोशिश हो रही है.
Thing about her was that she used to come to the pool. I used to ask her, normal people are not coming. They say we'll have some skin infection, हमें ये हो जाएगा, कान में infection हो जाएगा, और मैंने कहा आप बहुत बोल्ड हो. After all those treatments, chemo cycles, radiation, and you still have the guts to jump into a pool where it's a public pool. So inviting Dr. Gurbir Brar and Mrs. Malvinder Chahar. And where he dedicated 32 years to various roles and responsibility. He is currently leading several committees for UGC. In the past, he has served as VC at Hari Singh Vishwavidyalaya in Madhya Pradesh, and he is also a member of the University Grants Commission. We welcome you, sir. We also have with us Professor Manjeet Bansal. Sir is a professor in civil engineering at Maharaja Ranjit Singh Punjab Technical University, Bathinda. He is president of India's nominee in the selection committee for faculty across all the 31 NITs. He has also served as a director of Government Institute of Engineering and Technology at Lehra Gaga, Sangrur in the past. Now I call Professor R.P. Tiwari to address the audience.
राजेश जिंदल, डॉक्टर रजनी जिंदल, हमारे विश्वविद्यालय की प्रोफेसर अंजना मुंशी और सभी प्रतिभागीगण, आज की दिन भर एक्टिविटी में आपने जो इस सेमिनार का वर्कशॉप का जो फोकल थीम था उसके विभिन्न एस्पेक्ट्स में यहाँ पर चर्चा हुई होगी और इसके बहुत अच्छे परिणाम भी आएंगे। अभी मुझे डॉक्टर जिंदल साहब ने बताया कि एक मातृशक्ति यहाँ अपना पोस्ट कैंसर एक्सपीरियंस जो उनका था और जो उन्होंने इसको बहुत ही बहादुरी के साथ इस रोग से स्वयं को लड़ा और वो इसमें विक्टोरियस हुई। आई ऑल्सो हैव सक्सेस स्टोरी टू शेयर। My own uncle means my father's youngest brother. He was detected cancer in 2005, multiple myeloma, and he is still surviving. And the main reason that I could locate for his survival is the courage with which he is fighting this deadly disease. Of course, he has to periodically visit Tata Memorial, Bombay, and he has to take medicine, and that has actually spoiled his political career. He was elected MLA 3 times, but because now he has become very big, but he is still surviving, and he is doing all other activities, daily activities, and limited social work also. So the courage and precaution, in my opinion, these two are the things, and also knowing the various aspects of it and how to control the dietary preferences and all. In the brief introduction, it was informed that I served in Mizoram University for 32 years. That means I lived in Aizawl for 32 years. And if you Google it out, you will find that Aizawl or Mizoram as a whole is called as the cancer capital of India. There is a high incidence of cancer, and during my 32 years of sojourn in Aizawl, around 14 teachers below the age of 55 they died, and all 14 teachers died due to cancer only. It is so high, it's so prevalent in the entire Mizo community. Mizoram means Ram is land and Mizo is the community. So the land of Mijos, that is Mizoram. And the research is going on for the last 2 decades to exactly locate the region of this high prevalence of cancer in Mizoram. But researchers have not zeroed down to any one, but the couple of causes that and the several research articles. If you see the Google it out, you will find several articles on the high incidence of cancer in Mizoram.
Reception, and now this brings us to a close of this meeting today. We want to honor few people who have been instrumental in the execution of this workshop. I would call the auditorium staff, Mr.
Satnam and Amrit, please come on the stage.
Satnam and Amrit, please come on the stage.